All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to another Aplos webinar. It's Tuesday, the 15th of November. We're glad you guys can tune in here. And so, as usual, just going to ask if a few of you would just in the question column, if you just kind of give me an indication that you can hear the audio and you can see the screen okay, that would be great. No sound, got it. No sound yet. Once again, okay, there you go. Wanda, welcome. Yes. Michael, good. Thank you. Great. Yeah, you couldn't hear it before because we had it muted on. So welcome to Aplos webinar. We're going to get started here in just a minute or two. Just kind of a couple things before we get going. First of all, if you are on the Aplos Facebook page, we're going to do something for the first time. So those of you who are joining us today are a test market for us. We are Facebook Live today for the first time ever. So trying some new technology. So if you want to check that out or tell people to check it out, that's great as well. So we're super excited about today's webinar in that we are changing gears a little bit from what we've done. And we've done a lot of traditional fundraising tips and tricks, but today we're just going to have a conversation with an executive director. And I'll introduce to you our guest here in just a second. And as usual, also, if you're on Twitter, you can use the hashtag Aplos webinar throughout. You can ask questions, you can interact, you can certainly put some of your own comments. And I am at Fugitive DMK. That's FUGATIVE DMK with that. So the Facebook, on the Facebook, it's just Aplos software on Facebook. That's a great question. And as always, we'll take questions at the end. All of our webinars are recorded, and we make those available for you to listen to later on, or if you want to share those with friends, families, board members, donors, whichever you please. So with that, we're going to get going here in just a second. So again, if you the first time with us, I'm Dan Kimball. I'm a product specialist here at Aplos. I have 20 years of fundraising experience here in the community, and really excited to share some of my thoughts and things I've learned with those of you who are interested in the fundraising and nonprofit sector. And again, there's the Twitter right there for you to check out. So kind of by way of introduction, we're going to really be talking to people who are nonprofit executive directors, or if you're a nonprofit leader. We know that you wear many hats. We know that you have lots of responsibilities. And, I was just kind of thinking between the work of the mission that you do, balancing multiple budgets, running a staff, working with a board, volunteers, raising money, and so much more, how tiring it can be and sometimes how overwhelming it can be. But today, we're going to really kind of have a conversation about what is it like? What's a day in the life of an executive director? And I'm really pleased to introduce Mike Firpo. Welcome, Mike.
Thanks for having me.
And I'll introduce Mike and we'll get going. Mike is the executive director of First Tee of Fresno. Mike has a long history in the world of golf, but that doesn't necessarily lead to why he's here, but it does, if that kind of makes sense. Mike was as you can see on his bio, I'm not going to read it word for word, but has a lot of experience in the golf world, both as a golf pro and then also as a coach. He's done some coaching here locally. But this is what I'm really excited and why I think Mike is going to be a great guest for our Aplos webinar today, is that Mike was instrumental in bringing First Tee Fresno to Fresno because of his belief that junior golf and its values was not being offered to all children. He's been very involved with every facet of golf, and there's a little bit more about his bio here. So Mike, welcome. And by way of introduction, I'm just going to ask you why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your organization?
Sure. Thanks for having me. Great to be on. As it said in my bio, I'm a native Fresno, born and raised here. Did all my schooling here and got into the golf industry as a child. I played golf as a child and was the benefit of having grandparents and parents who played. I learned a lot about the game as a young age. And as I got older and got into the business professionally, I started seeing how kids were coming and going, but it was only certain kids who had access to the game and could get out to the golf course. And,
Yeah.
and the first tee really brings a set of inherent values from that game that is more important than the game of golf, but they can use it in everyday life. So when you take my passion, as you know, we go way back, my passion for Fresno, my passion for golf, and I love doing all this stuff in our own town. The first tee was a natural to bring here. So this is what I love doing. We're able to teach this life skills curriculum around the game of golf. So not only are we getting all these kids learning the game, but it's the life skills that we really want to impress upon them that they can then use at school and at home, and just to help them give them a leg up as they get older.
Because golf kind of has had kind of an interesting perception about it, right? You want to tell us?
It does, and as I say, it's a fact. So it wasn't just the perception was reality. Golf was only accessible to certain groups of people who had the means and the ability to get to a golf course and afford it and those type of things. So you had a large segment of society that did not think golf was for them because the expenses were too much. They didn't have access to the golf courses. And that's not right. I grew up on public golf courses, and some of the local golf pros around here are phenomenal. Mm-hmm. And the idea is that should be available to everybody. Mm-hmm. And it's what golf brings to the person, not what the golf is about. So when you get somebody who enjoys the game of golf, it affects them in the rest of their life because, as we were talking before, you have things like the integrity of the game. You have to call your own penalties. You have to do all these things on your own. And so when you teach people how to be responsible for their own actions while they're playing golf, it's fun.
Yeah.
And so the whole idea of mixing golf, life skills, and better citizenship and all this stuff, it's a lot of fun.
It's great. It's great. So when did you start First Tee of Fresno? How many years have you been?
We our very first class with any kids was May 31st of 2008.
Okay.
And it's a blast. The process started about 2 years prior to that, putting together a business plan, getting a board of directors together, working on how we were going to function, finding a golf course in town to host us. The city of Fresno, Riverside Golf Course, was very, very helpful in saying, yes, we want you to be this to be your home. So we're in our 9th year of programming right now.
And you're the first executive director, correct?
I'm the first and the only and the founder of the program.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start off by asking you, why did you become an executive director, or did you choose to become an executive director?
Well, and I love the way you phrase that, because why did you choose, or did you choose? And the reality of it is the process ended up making it to where I wasn't going to want to hire somebody else. So let me explain that. I spent with a group of very wonderful people, volunteers just like myself, for a couple of years putting this chapter together.
Okay.
And as a golf professional myself, once it got to the point to where, hey, we're ready to go. We've done some fundraising. We got our chapter status. The first tee is on board with us. We're now the First Tee of Fresno.
Okay.
Now we're going to go out and start programming. Well, the board says now we need to hire an executive director. And I was like, at this point, no offense to somebody I might have hired, I don't want to turn it over to somebody else.
Okay.
I put too much of my own blood and sweat and tears, so to speak, into getting it started. So I said, I want to do it. And I'll be honest with you, I had no experience in the nonprofit executive director world.
Okay.
But as with a lot of things in life, it was something that meant enough to me that we will figure this out as we go. And it sounds a little weird, but I mean, here we are.
So that leads into our next question about what skills did you have that helped you prepare for your position?
My first answer to that was I didn't have any. But the reality of it is we all do have skills that can help you be an executive director or a leader of a group. And I think what's helped me, and it has a lot to do with my upbringing around the game of golf, was dealing with other people and building relationships and talking to people. I think the number one thing that an executive director has to do is you just have to learn how to talk to people from all sorts of backgrounds. It doesn't matter if one person is a CEO of a major corporation and another person runs a soup kitchen, or one person's a bagger at a grocery store and the other person built a shopping center. You need to communicate with everybody, and they're all valuable to you in one way or another, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. In fact, I think in my own personal experience, what I found in the fundraising field is that it's usually about people that are passionate about something. It's not that people wake up and one day and say, I want to become an executive director. I mean, it's not what I found. I found that in your case, you're passionate about something, you saw a need, and you wanted to make a difference in your community, and you jumped right into it. So I think hopefully people, that are listening and can relate to that. A lot of our Aplos customers are small nonprofits, people that do this on the side or do it part-time or are just struggling to kind of get this off the ground. So hopefully, you're encouraged out there by that. So what's a typical day for you, Mike?
Well, first of all, there is no 9 to 5. There is no Monday through Friday. So when somebody asks, and I get this question a lot, what do you do on a typical day? I mean, we had a friend of ours, a young man who came over and has visited us now 3 times from France. He was an exchange student at first. Now he's a friend of the family. Okay. And he's like, I want to know what your typical day is like. And I'm like, there isn't one. First of all, there's not a typical day in the life of an executive director of a nonprofit.
Can you guys relate to that out there?
But it's something where you start with the plan of, okay, here's what I need to do today. Here's what I have coming up this week. Here's what's going on next month. So you always have your short and long-term things that are coming up. You start your day, and then quite frankly, in today's world, between emails and text messages and phone calls, you get pulled off track every now and then, and you have to deal with things, and you deal with them, and then you come back on track. So a typical day is dealing with follow-up to a lot of people that you've been talking to, whether they're volunteers, donors, board members, participants, parents. I'm fortunate in that my office sits at Riverside Golf Course, and we program right outside my door. I mean, literally, I open my window, and there's kids 20 feet away. Okay. So I also have the advantage and disadvantage, depending on how you look at it, is I have kids come in and say hi, and I have parents come in and say hi. And so part of my typical day is dealing with our participants and their families. Okay. But you're always looking at what events are coming up and how can you make things better. But I do stress that if you spend your day trying to solve problems, you're probably going to get very stressed out. Mm-hmm. You spend your day dealing with either problems or situations or events coming up. There are a lot of good things happen during the course of my day, and I get to interact with people. So sitting here talking to you, that's a plus in my day. It's something that is good. So, some people go, I got to take an hour and go do this when I should be doing something else. Well, no, I want to go meet and talk to people.
Great. And just as a reminder, folks, if you are want to interact with us on Twitter, we're at hashtag Aplos webinar, and you can ask questions, interact, and all of that. So along that kind of theme, I know an important part of an executive director's job is the staff. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about your role with your staff. How many staff do you have, and what's your interaction like?
Yeah, we have First Tee chapters throughout the country are all different.
Okay. So you're a chapter-based nonprofit.
Yes, we're a chapter of an international organization called the First Tee. Okay. We're not a franchise, so we're not like opening a new McDonald's in another town or another state. We have our license with the First Tee, and we have a use agreement with Riverside Golf Course. And outside of very few guidelines that we have to adhere to, we operate on our own. Okay. So
that's helpful.
Yeah, and so most First Tee chapters are volunteer-based. Some have a lot of staff, some don't. In our particular case, I now have, in our 9th year, I have 3 full-time people, myself as one of them, and I have 2 other full-timers, and I have a part-timer. And then I have about 150 or so volunteers that do a variety of things from one day, one event to a couple hours a week for us. Okay. And so that's how we survive. As far as my interaction with them, that's also a little different from chapter to chapter. We're in a 12 by 56 modular building with all 4 of us that are on staff getting paid in the same building. Wow. And so we see each other every day. We talk to each other every day. It's a little different than me having an office and having people somewhere else.
Okay. Yeah. And how do you delegate some of the responsibilities? Do you have some staff that have more?
Yes.
How does that work?
Yeah. It's interesting because, in the network that we're in, I'm their boss, but I do stress in my world, there's 4 of us working. Mm-hmm. So naturally, I'm the one that needs to dictate certain things, but all of my staff, and I say all 3 of them, it's a very much independent type deal where people have tasks and then they go and do what they're supposed to do. Okay. I'm not overseeing everything somebody does. They come back to me with what they've accomplished, ideas, things I didn't ask them to do that they thought were important. So they have the freedom to do that. And I do think that's critical in what we do. Mm-hmm. When you have, we have over 25,000 kids that we impact a year. Wow. And I've got 4 of us in the office, 3 full-timers. Okay. So I cannot be watching every move somebody makes. Okay. And that's what I love about my staff. I have an excellent staff who can go off and make decisions on their own, which that's not the easiest thing to let somebody go do.
Yeah.
But I have a really good staff. So we let them work on their own. We report back. We have meetings. We chat and do those kind of things.
Great. Good input. So along with that, so one of the roles was staff, but you are responsible for your board.
Yep.
So tell us a little about what your role with your board is, kind of what that structure's like, what that's like for you.
Sure. I mean, in the literal term, I report to the board. I run the organization and I report to the board, and they make all the policies and those types of things. I have 13 board members that are currently active on our board. So in a sense, I have 13 bosses. Not always the easiest thing to deal with because you have the board doesn't always get together with a unified voice. You get a call from one, you get a call from another, and they may say different things. But that's how my relationship with them is to figure out what's best for the organization and then communicate that to the board. So we meet monthly. Some boards meet more, some boards meet less. We like meeting monthly so that we can keep the board engaged in what we do. I do send weekly reports to my board.
Okay.
So at the end of each week, they do get a very, very brief bullet point list of what was going on that week. So, and like probably any nonprofit, some board members probably read every line. Some board members glance at it and then shut it down.
Great.
And that's up to them.
Yeah.
So, but that's how we,
was that something you came up with, Mike, or is that something they asked for?
That's something the board asked for after a while. Since they're all busy doing their own thing, they wanted to be more engaged, and one way to be engaged was to get basically some notes each week on what's going on.
Right. And how do you motivate them? How do you get them engaged?
Honestly, and it's no disrespect to when they listen to me talk, but the easiest way, and it's something I learned a long time ago, is I find a board member who I think will relate to what I want done, and I get that board member to then present it to the rest of the board.
Okay. Can you give us an example of that?
Yeah. We talk about doing things where we want board members to run events as opposed to my name being on the top of every event throughout the year. And that's something that we talked about for quite honestly, multiple years. I brought it up probably 3 times over the period of 2 years. And it gets talked about a little bit, and then you move on with your business. Well, then I had a board chair come in that backed that decision and said, you know what, I've heard you mention this. I'm going to bring it up at a board meeting, and we're going to reintroduce this. That person brings it up at a board meeting, and before that meeting's over with, every board member is now in charge of an event. Okay. So, and that's just the way things work. And I've talked to a lot of different boards, a lot of different executive directors, and that's pretty common. And it's like a lot of things. If a board member says it to a board member, it's going to probably get a little more attention than if a staff person says it to the board. Because it's the board, and it's like I said, it's no disrespect to the board. It's just the way things are.
Yeah.
And so I think if you can engage 1 or 2 of your board members, kind of like going out and getting lobbyists, and then you go to the board, let it be their idea, or let them tell them it's your idea, but they're back. However they want to do it, I don't care. You just want to get your interest across. And I do think it's a little bit of a side note. Executive directors need to not be worried about who's getting credit for what's being done.
Great.
It's important, because if you were my board chair and I told you something that I really wanted done, and you said that's a great idea, and you went to the board and they congratulated you, I can still sit there and be happy about it.
Yeah, good.
Does that make sense?
Little bit of humility there sometimes,
There is, and it's just the way it is. I mean, my idea is to get the end result.
Yeah. Probably the most common question we get on Aplos webinars or discussion items that gets put out there is board and fundraising. How do I get my board to do fundraising? My board doesn't give. Can you offer any insight on that? It could be challenges. It could be successes.
Sure. I think as far as engaging your board with fundraising, first of all, we need to understand that fundraising is not getting a check from somebody. Okay. So for example, I have 13 board members. I have several of them that have no problem going and asking for money.
Okay.
But the reality of it is fundraising starts with a relationship. And it sounds like a cliche, just get to know somebody, but it's reality. You get to know somebody and they agree with what you're doing, the money will follow. If you meet with somebody with the intent of asking them for money, you're now going to get a transaction and not a relationship. You might get money, but then what's going to happen the next time you need money? So building a relationship is number 1. Number 2, I have board members that do not want to ask for money.
Okay.
They are still fundraisers in your organization, because guess what? If I go out, I just had 2 meetings in the last couple of days. I've had 3 meetings in the last 2 days with people that we build relationships with. I can go to that board member who doesn't like to ask for money, give them the information about the person I just spoke to. And if that board member gets on the phone and calls that person and says, Hi, Mr. Kimball. I'm so-and-so from the first Tee of Fresno. I just wanted to thank you for your donation, and I wanted to express that how important that is to us as a board member. Now, that's fundraising.
Yeah.
They're now thanking that board member. And a lot of people, I'll call them, thank somebody.
Yeah. Yeah.
So don't be discouraged if somebody on your board doesn't like to fundraise, because guess what? They can. They can write a letter.
Yeah.
They can make a phone call. They can introduce you to somebody. Mm-hmm. I know somebody with a ton of money, and they love golf, and they love kids. Fine. Just introduce me.
Yeah.
So fundraising is very broad, and don't limit it to getting a check.
That's great insight. I heard one time, one of my favorite, the 3 C's of a board member. I don't know if you remember this. It's we want your cash, your clout, or your contacts. Mm-hmm. And some would say that your contacts and your clout are more important.
Yes.
Than the cash kind of thing.
I just met with a board member who's one of our biggest donors yesterday, and I told him, I said, I really don't care if you ever write me another check. I want 5 of your friends.
Yeah.
I've known him long enough to where we can have that conversation.
Yeah.
And he smiled.
Yeah,
and I said, I still want your check, and he kind of laughed again. But you're right. It's the people you know, and it's your circle of influence. That's fundraising.
Yeah, I love your focus on relationships. So since we're talking about fundraising, what's your fundraising strategies and plans for your organization? Do you do monthly or yearly goals? Let's talk about your fundraising plan.
Interestingly enough, we're in a transition period right now. We run 4 or 5 significant fundraisers a year, spread out from a luncheon we do earlier in the year that doesn't make a ton of money, but it's still a fundraiser and engages people in a business lunch, all the way to the end of the year when we have a golf tournament in October. And we have about 4 or 5 of them spread out. And they're each designed to attract a different demographic, a different clientele.
Okay.
So a business lunch, quite frankly, anybody who wants to know about us can come to a business lunch and go back to work and hear about us and do it that way. Golf tournament, obviously golfers. We do a helicopter golf ball drop. That's just anybody who wants to pay $10 for a chance to win $3,000. We do another golf tournament, and the golf tournaments are run separately with different demographics, prices, golf courses, things like that. So we try to find different avenues where people can get engaged. We're transitioning now, not away from events, but we're trying to get more into the annual giving campaigns and getting people to donate and help sponsor children, things like that. And now we're venturing into taking our donor base and asking them for referrals. Mm-hmm. I just go in and ask people that I've built a relationship with, which again goes back to getting to know people, and just saying, hey, anybody who you don't feel a conflict with, that you don't mind, can you help and introduce me? And if you're giving $1,200 a year, for example, then we can go to your buddies and they go, I have no problem. I got 3 guys right now. I'll go tell them they need to join me. Right. Well, that's a fundraising strategy. Go use other people to find influences.
Do you do a fundraising plan, a yearly plan of any kind?
We do have one. I would say we're probably not the best at actually writing down a plan because we've had kind of a system in place. Okay. But that's why this transition period right now, I would say probably by the end of next year, we will kind of rewrite that plan a little bit and get a little more specific with it.
And how do you balance events versus, because some people say, oh, events are so time consuming, they're staff intensive, they're volunteer exhausting, versus, hey, I'd rather just have somebody write me a check for $100,000 or whatever.
If you find that person, let me know. Well, no, here's how we look at it. If I'm running a golf tournament, they'll be just real blunt. If I'm running a golf tournament and I'm making $5,000 on the other end, don't run the golf tournament.
Okay.
I mean, it's just, to your point, I can go find 5 people to give me $1,000 a lot easier than the months it takes to plan a golf tournament and the expense it takes to plan a golf tournament. I find 100 people to write a $150 check to just play in the golf tournament. Well, if I go to those 100 people and ask them to write me a $100 check instead of $150 to play in a golf tournament, it can be over within a few minutes. So if you're running an event and it's not bringing significant returns, and in my world, significant would have to be at least $10,000 to $15,000 minimum.
So each nonprofit might be able to kind of judge that differently.
Right. If your nonprofit has a annual budget where your expenses are $300,000 and you're running a golf tournament making 5 or 10, do something else.
Yeah.
It's too much of your time being used to run that event. So each nonprofit is going to need to value how much time are they spending, and also what awareness factor is there.
Okay.
So like we run our core value luncheon in February, March each year, and it doesn't make a ton of money, but 250 to 300 people show up, and it gives us the ability to educate them during that 90 minutes. And so there's an awareness factor of that event.
Yeah. There's a term called friendraising. I don't know if you guys use that. I like that term a lot.
Yes,
I think,
absolutely.
Any challenges before we move on from the fundraising side of that?
Real quickly, we don't have to get into a lot, but real quickly, there's thousands of nonprofits in town. And so you're always one of your challenges is to get yours known. We're only 9 years old. Some of our specific challenges are getting people to understand the balance between golf and the life skills. We're not a golf organization. We're using golf to teach this life skill curriculum. So those are some of the challenges. It's just the communication to the public of what you're actually doing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other surprises? Any fundraising stories that you that stand out?
No, I mean, there's such a wide variety of ways that money has come in and things, and it's not a lot really. I mean, it's day by day.
Yeah. So if you're an executive director and you're listening in today, we'd love to hear from you. We're going to have some questions at the end of the time, but certainly if you are a Twitter user, hashtag Aplos webinar and tell us your thoughts about either fundraising or your fundraising strategies, or even some board stories. I'm sure you all have some. Well, let's move on from fundraising. Let's talk a little bit about social media, because that seems to really, at least for me, when I read fundraising articles and all the influencers out there right now, everything's about social media. So first of all, Mike, what's your role with social media, and how do you use social media for your organization?
We've started several years ago with Facebook and Twitter. We now have an Instagram account as well. It helps that I have a couple of my staff members are in their 20s, so that's a good thing.
I didn't want to throw you under the bus, and for sake of revealing, Mike and I live in the same community. We actually went to high school together.
Yep.
And we'll just say that we did not graduate in the last 10 years
or 20 years.
So that's a great point there.
Yeah, no, we do use Facebook quite extensively. We connected, which again, for somebody my age, our Twitter account's connected to Facebook, which is great because I can put something on Facebook and it automatically becomes a tweet. Mm-hmm. So that's good for me. I don't have to think about all those platforms.
Okay.
I've got my 20-somethings in the office that use Instagram. They take photos during classes, pop things, and that's a great avenue. I think social media, I was hesitant to get into it, partly a generational thing. But I had a board member sign us up with Facebook and Twitter and just kind of shoved it down my throat. I wasn't resisting. I just didn't want to make the effort. It's now become an integral part of what we do.
Okay.
We do get a lot of feedback. It works.
Mm-hmm.
We use it. We schedule posts on Facebook, which I didn't even know you can schedule a post. So I think it's very integral to getting your word out, because most nonprofits that are probably listening and people out don't have advertising budgets.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't have, and so Facebook and Twitter and Instagram becomes an advertising forum. We get a lot of followers. A lot of our families follow us intentionally so they can share something. I've got a lot of friends on my personal Facebook page. So as you've seen, I share almost every Facebook post that goes out.
Yeah.
I share it. My friends share it. Next thing you know, you've got 15, 20,000 people that see something. They don't even have to react to it.
Yeah.
But if they see the first Tee of Fresno over and over and over, eventually they may act on it.
Great.
So I think social media, when done properly, the kids love it.
Mm-hmm.
They love it. You put a picture up of those kids. The parents are all responding. The kids love it.
Yeah. And they themselves probably interact when they're out on the, participating in events in terms of their own Instagram, posting pictures, that kind of thing.
Yes, and you can stay tuned for those who follow us, because coming up in next spring, you'll see some more interaction being created through social media, where we'll be putting the word out, challenging people to come in and do some posting on our Facebook page.
Do you pay for Facebook advertising ever?
I have.
Yeah.
It's more an occasional, once in a while, I'll post something that gets a lot of reaction right away, or I'll post something that I look at and think, you know what, that's something I want more people to know than just our base. And I think it's fine. I think, $20, $40, $60, and you can reach thousands of people. Again, they don't even have to react to it, but if it pops up and they move past it, at least they see it. So a couple $100 a year maybe. Okay. So we don't do it on a regular basis. No.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Any other thoughts on social media? Anything you've learned along the way, or?
No, you just have to track it. You got to make sure that your pages are set up and you're seeing who's posting what. So that is one side of it. Is there's a little bit of a risk factor. You got to make sure that you're paying attention to who's putting something on your page, and make sure it's set up in a way that people aren't putting false and negative things out there. Because unfortunately, too many people believe something gets put on social media that is true.
Yeah.
We don't want to even go down that road. Good. But
Yeah, I would encourage you, if you are a nonprofit leader and you're overwhelmed, or you don't know about social media, I agree with Mike. Regardless of your age or your generation or how old or young your nonprofit is, I would encourage you to to tap into it at some level, but have a strategy with it, kind of figure out where you want to go with it.
Yeah, and I did real quickly. I did speak to people. I actually went to a seminar, and there happened to be somebody there who was a social media professional, and so I would definitely recommend getting some of that feedback from somebody. Don't just jump into it. But if you're not doing Facebook or Twitter or Instagram at all, you need to get into it.
Yeah, it's great marketing. Good. So, what's a difficult decision you've had to make as an executive director?
The most difficult decision I had to make, it's pretty simple. I actually had to tell a friend of mine that he didn't get the job that he applied for with us.
Okay.
And that was not easy at all. I avoided it. I did make sure that it was the very next day that we sat down and chatted right away. I could have put it off because nobody knew when the decision was going to be final. But the person that I had to have the chat with was qualified. Mm-hmm. But we just had somebody else that we felt was a better spot at that point to bring into that position. And that was not easy. Now, to the extent of that difficult decision, which was horrible, I regret it because I've known this person a long time. Mm-hmm. They actually made it a lot easier on me, because as soon as I brought it up, they showed their character and put me at ease, which was great. Not an easy conversation to have.
Yeah.
So when somebody thinks they're getting something and they don't.
Sure. Okay.
So yeah, that was not easy. That's one of the sides I don't like to deal with, because like I said, I do treat my office as we're just a group of employees. Yeah. I'm not a heavy-handed leader. I'm not a drill sergeant at all. Yeah. In fact, I probably need to be a little more of one, but I'm not.
Yeah. What's the process in terms of when you started, 7 years ago, you said? 9 years ago. Yeah, sorry. That's when you started 9 years ago, what you were doing looks very different than what you're doing now in terms of you've added some programs, you're growing, you're getting farther there. So talk to me a little bit about, that process in terms of when you decide to grow, who makes those decisions? What's involved in that? Because at some point you grow too fast and you're losing focus.
Yeah, we've been very intentional about our growth. When we first started, and I'm not the only one who's done this, we started our nonprofit, small board. I was the only employee.
How many board when you first started?
We had 6 board members.
Okay, and now you're 13.
We're at 13.
Right?
We hovered for the first 6 or 7 years between 6 and 10. And so I was the executive director, I was the program director, I was the janitor. I was, my first board chair used to say, you're the chief cook and bottle washer or something, like one of those things. And it's like, you do everything. Yeah. You're the one there before everybody gets there. You're the one that everybody leaves. You're the coach on the tee line. You're also doing the fundraising. So that lasted for a few years, actually. But I had a great small group of volunteers that were very dedicated to helping our cause, and they knew that we just didn't have the funding to hire them, so they did it for free. So then it got to a point where we sat down as a board and said, here's where we're at, and here's where we'll stay, because I am done expanding. Okay. There is no more mic to go around. Okay. And so you reach that point, and our board took a leap of faith, and we hired a program director, which is another key component to somebody running all the programming so I can run all the executive stuff. And at that time, we didn't necessarily know we had the money to do it. But in order to expand, sometimes you have to take that leap of faith. Okay. And the beauty of it was, since it was very intentional and we had a plan in place, 12 months after we hired that person and basically doubled our payroll, we had more money in the bank than before we hired the person, including paying that person. Because you can do more and make more with more people. Sure. You just have to figure out the right time to do that. Had we tried to go into it with 2 employees, I don't know that it would have worked. I had to do what I did for a while, but it got to a point where we needed more. So we've been very intentional about our expansion. And it's something that you just have to really kind of sit down and think through.
And how do you measure your success? What's kind of your benchmarks there? There's other than donations coming in, which is
right. And there's several ways. Nationally, a lot of people like to hear, we're impacting over 25,000 kids a year. The number of kids you impact would be a way to measure success. Okay. Another way to measure success for us is we have over 2,000 kids that come out to weekly classes at facilities, or we go to them. We have a lot of kids in an in-school program as well that make up the 25,000, but we have over 2,000 that come to facilities where we teach weekly, and that's a different set of group that I look at more because that's higher impact. And then beyond that, it may sound a little bit, like a cliche, but I look at the individuals that we see, and it's a one thing at a time, one kid at a time. And that literally is how we do it. I have a parent come in and thank me for something their kids are doing, and that's success. We have a young man that we can talk about in a minute if you want. We have a young man graduating from UC Irvine with a double major. And when he was 13, he was almost kicked out of our program because he didn't know how to behave.
Wow.
So I look at that one kid, that's success for what we're doing. And to realize that when you have an impact over a lot of kids, then you can look at it either way you want. And the last way I look at success, we launched in 2008, and I think most people listening understand what happened to the economy in 2008.
Yeah, great point.
So
yeah.
I started asking for money in the spring of 2000, actually in 2007, but in 2008, we started asking for money on a full-time basis, and the economy went in the tank, and we're still here.
Okay.
So that alone, I think, is success as well.
Well, one interesting fact that's along those lines, and it's a tad bit off topic, but it's not, is that people in fundraising think that people only give when the economy's strong. But it's interesting that good nonprofits actually, philanthropic dollars tend to stay pretty strong even in tougher economic times. So that's a testament to good work, but it's also just, don't be discouraged, right?
No, and I learned that right away. A lot of the corporations started holding on to their money, but what people don't seem to realize is between 2008 and 2010, there were studies, and a lot of people are showing that individuals kept giving and some gave more because they knew that these causes were important. Even when the economy is down, you had individuals giving. And so that is important to understand that the economy going up and down doesn't necessarily affect fundraising going up and down. It changes fundraising, but it doesn't necessarily affect the money you bring in.
Great. What's the best advice you've ever been given?
There were two things that I would note right away. One wasn't advice given me directly in a one-on-one conversation. It was actually during a presentation at one of our network meetings. And we had this very vibrant, intelligent speaker get up. And she said, basically, it sounds simple, but she said, be you. Don't, as an executive director and somebody running an organization, don't try to be the 13 board members because you can't do that. You need to be you. You're doing this for a reason, and most executive directors, if they're running a nonprofit, hopefully are not doing it for the paycheck. They're doing it because they want to be there. So you need to be you, if that makes sense. You cannot be somebody else. And I'm a talker, and I go and donors pick up on that, but they also hear my passion in my voice when I talk to them.
Yeah.
So you need to be you. Don't try to be 13 board members if you have 13 board members. The other one was a comment that a board member made when we were going through some of this expansion that I've used to this day, and it's one of my favorite lines, is that in the nonprofit world especially, sometimes you have to jump off the cliff and learn to fly on the way down. Because sometimes there's things you want to do and you're not sure if you can do it. But if you wait till the right time, as we know a lot of things, the right time never presents itself. It never says right time is now. Nothing ever pops up on, text messages and email. I never get anything from somewhere that says the time is now. So, and he just said, look, when we hired this program director the first time, and he made the comment, he said, look, he goes, we can do this. And sometimes you have to jump and then you learn to fly while you're falling down. While you're falling. And I love that because we're all taking risks. Anybody in the nonprofit world, you're taking risks going out there trying to survive.
Sometimes, it might be a stretch, but I watch Shark Tank a lot. I don't know if you watch that show, but
not every week, but I watch it.
And I love the risk that's involved there. And sometimes I can relate to as a former fundraiser, and a former director in the nonprofit world. I can really relate to kind of the scariness of they always talk about, how do we get bigger? How do we expand? And that risk involved. And so that's a great example with that. I think we talked about this a little bit. Share a story with us that you think represents the work that you do. You started talking about it a little bit. Hear a little bit more.
There's actually two if I don't go too long, because this is the area where you got to be careful with me because I'll start rambling because there are a lot of stories. But the two that I'd like to talk about, one, I'll get back to the other double major kid in a minute. But the one story that was one of our first ones was we went over into Southeast Fresno, Yosemite Middle School, if anybody's familiar with that out there. We started a golf academy out there in 2010 in a place where golf didn't exist at all. And so we were getting a few kids here and there. Most of these kids can never get to a golf course, so we facilitate everything for them. So long story.
Just so for folks that so we're based in Fresno, California. We have a lot of national folks around the country, but in our community, that's a very inner city. It's school. So
it has problems with gangs. It's a lower socioeconomic area. The kids don't have the means to get somewhere. So we went with Fresno Unified, our local district here was very helpful. We went in and started a golf academy because we wanted to do two things. We wanted to bring golf to everyone, which is part of our mission. And Fresno Unified wanted to prove that they could bring something positive to an area where people didn't think it could succeed. So anyway, as we get back to it, at the end of that first year, and we had a few kids coming and going. These are kids who had never seen golf. And at the end of the year, we took them over to the coast, to Monterey area, to see one of our chapters in Salinas, another small town. And they had their own golf course. And so we went there, introduced the kids. So anyway, we had these kids, we bought them golf shirts, and these are kids that usually come with the pants hanging down and the t-shirts out. And they're just, and so they had learned throughout the year what we do. And this one kid shows up for our field trip that day, and he walks up to me and he says, "Hey, Coach Mike." And I turn around, and here's this kid wearing one of these Ben Hogan style hats, the little floppy brimmed hats that Ben Hogan used to wear in the golf hats. And he's got on his golf shirt that we gave him. It's tucked in. He's got a belt on, and he's got these slacks. And I looked at him and I'm like, "Jose, you look good." And he goes, and he steps back, pulls his shoulder and goes, "I know." He goes, "I'm wearing my Sunday pants." and I don't know if a lot of people understand what that means. This was probably the only pair of golf slacks or long pants besides jeans that this kid owned.
Wow.
And he put them on to go on this field trip. And he got this beanie, he said, from his grandfather who happened to have one. And he saw it on TV. And so he made an intentional effort to look that good that day because he knew he was going to golf and he's going on a field trip. And that was 6 years ago, and it still hits me today when I think about it. That, to me, goes back to success. That is success. This kid now gets it. And then the other quick one was this young man, typical teenager, struggled with some anger issues, threw a club in class, was sent to me because his dad didn't want to deal with him. His dad was there. He's like, "You need to talk to him because I'm at my wit's end." And he's been a problem, not getting good grades in school. He came and spoke to me. He promised me he would behave. So I actually did not discipline him at all. I said, "Go ahead. I'm going to give you another chance. I trust that you're upset with yourself." And he agreed. So fast forward 4 years later, he's a straight A student. Great. He got into the honors program at UC Irvine. And now he's graduating this coming next May in 2017 with a double major. He's planning on going to law school or something else. He's got these things in mind. He's got his plan in place. And he told me just a few weeks ago when he sent a letter to me and we talked on the phone, I asked him to describe how the first team may have helped him. And he's describing how he's using our 9 core values now at UC Irvine when he feels overwhelmed. And so, and he's using the responsibility, the judgment and respect. And so seeing those two types of things and knowing there are so many more of those stories out there that we just don't hear. Yeah. Those are a couple of the stories that I mean, it gets me, I get going in the morning when I hear that stuff. Yeah.
That's great. That's great. So if I come to you and I say, "Hey, Mike, I'm starting a nonprofit and I'm a new executive director. What advice would you give me? Is there anything what insight would you offer me?"
Yeah. First of all, put the best business plan you can in place for 3 to 5 years on what you think you're going to do. Understand that it's not going to happen probably that way, but at least it gives you a path to start on. And if you can make it happen, that's great. So get a very detailed path of what you want to see happen. And there is no right or wrong to how you write that. But the other part of it is don't be afraid to go slow. You don't need to try to expand and have a ton of kids if you're doing what I do. You need to take things at whatever pace you can take it at and not worry about it. Tell your story, get your point across to people who are going to help you financially, build those relationships, but don't rush. Don't think, "Hey, I got to have 1,000 kids right now or nobody's going to give me any money." My first couple of years, I had some very large donors giving us over $5,000 and I had 150 kids in my program, because they understood the story of what we were doing. It's not about numbers. It's about the story. So don't rush. Ask for a lot of help. Learn from other people. I was fortunate because at the time we joined, we had almost 200 chapters around the country that I was able to pull from. And I had chapters in our region that I was able to call and talk to. And so as an executive director of a small nonprofit, find somebody you can relate to. They can call me if they want to. I can tell them all sorts of stories of mistakes I made. But reach out to people. Most people, if they're running nonprofits, don't mind helping other nonprofits. Even if it's somebody I'm competing for money with, we still talk and we want to raise money together. So take it slow, get a plan in place, and just kind of trudge along that way.
Yeah. One of the things we were talking about before we started the webinar is in the community here where Aplos is located, there's a lot of large nonprofits, and I'm sure everybody listening today kind of can relate to this. And it seems like some of the big, you see the St. Jude's commercials or, the big nonprofits. And I get this a lot on my webinars as people say, gosh, we're the little guys, or we're faith-based, people, we don't have this connection. Can you offer any insight in terms of how you navigated, raising money in spite of maybe, for lack of a better word, the competition? How do you get around that?
I think the best thing you can do is make sure that people understand what's at the core of what you're doing. So an example for us is we're called the first Tee of Fresno. People see us as golf. So our goal is to make people understand that as important as I think golf is, because that's my life, it's what else are we doing, and finding those stories like this young man at Irvine, but finding stories that will help relate what you are really doing in your community and why it's a benefit. And there's nothing wrong with those other nonprofits. We actually spend time. I go to other fundraisers. I donate to other causes because I want to meet those people for one. And those people will help you be successful. It's amazing because somebody here at Valley Children's Hospital, one of our largest facilities here, with everything they do with the kids here in our area. We're kind of the St. Jude of our area, but we have a great facility, and people at Valley Children's are wonderful. And the Ronald McDonald House here, they will actually help us with our cause as well. Yeah. So don't look at it as Ford versus Chevy. Look at it as we're all trying to do something good for the community and embrace it and understand it that way. And I think you'll be successful.
Creating partnerships along the way as well. Good. Yeah. One of the things I will say about Mike, and he's not ready for this, but I follow him on Facebook, and he's probably one of the most positive people in the community that I know. Like, you're always encouraging people, let's not rag on this and get caught up in political debates, but just get out there. You always talk about just get out there and do something good for your community, and I appreciate about that, So
I appreciate it. Thanks.
Great. So now it's your turn. We're going to kind of start to wrap up. For those of you, if you have any questions for Mike, for me, you want to lay anything out there about nonprofit leadership as an executive director, Mike's contact is up here on the screen, as well as mine. We love to interact with our webinar people that listen to our webinars. Again, you can use the hashtag Aplos webinar. Certainly put that out there, and any questions out there. Again, all of our webinars are recorded, and you'll receive an email here within the day or two about where you can access that for future listening. So Facebook. It's encouraging to hear. Thank you, Liz, for that. Okay. It's encouraging to hear your success as the founder. I'm just going to go ahead and, Liz, I'm going to go ahead and just read this. It just says, it's encouraging to hear of your success as the founder, executive director of your nonprofit. I started a nonprofit, and we are finishing out our first year. I'm also an executive director, and it's a struggle balancing working with clients. I'm a social worker, and I work directly with former foster youth clients with fundraising needs of a new agency. We are so new that I'm not paid. Gosh, good for you. Good job. Wow. Either, so that all the money can go towards my clients. You answered my first question on advice for a new nonprofit, so thank you. Another question. Do you raise money primarily with individual donations or grants? Great question, Liz. And by the way, I just want to, again, commend you for that work.
Here's my philosophy on grants. Especially being brand new with what you're doing. If you can find some startup grants that can infuse your organization with some money to help your cause get started, I think that would be wonderful. Our philosophy on grants is that I want to apply for grants we're eligible for. I don't want to rely on grants for line item budget things that we're going to have year after year, because grants just aren't reliable year after year. But in the beginning, if you can get a couple of startup type grants that you can then work off of, that could help. Most of our money comes from, I'll give you an example, roughly 10% of our money comes from registrations from our kids. And then the rest comes from either events we're running or individual gives. And so it's a balance between both. And depending on your community, you can balance the amount of events you can run versus individual giving. We're stressing more and more of the individual giving now. We're going to keep running our events because they're popular, but the individual giving, telling your story, you're running this nonprofit with no fee to yourself, and that's a story you need to tell. Don't be afraid to mention that. You're not bragging about it. You're just letting them know that you believe so much in what you're doing that you're doing this without getting a paycheck yet. it is important for you at some point to get a paycheck. But I think there's a story there to tell, and people will relate to that. But I would hesitate to try to find some grants that you're going to have to rely on year after year. That's my biggest concern.
Yeah, I agree. And Liz, the other thing I might add is that you look for, there's startup grants where they're not as long-term commitments. So they're designed to help nonprofits kind of get their legs up and running. So you might kind of look into that as well.
Yeah, let me add real quick to that.
Sure.
Just real quick.
Yeah.
We had a program a few years ago that we got through our home office, so that helped. But we had a 3-year program where we were eligible for a matching grant based on our success in raising money. We received probably $70,000 to $80,000 in the course of 3 years, split up. And that was just a 3-year, a finite timeline. But what it helped us do was it helped us go hire that new person.
Mm-hmm.
And once we hired that new person, we then worked on generating the funds. So when we knew that grant was going to run out, we had that money replaced with other individual gives and events. So the money infused us, but you have to make sure that you're taking that money and then saying, okay, now what can I do to make sure I'm not relying on that money? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's good.
So
if there's an organization called Foundation Center, and it's a place you can research grants, and a lot of your local universities or Association of Fundraising Professionals, also known as AFP, a lot of those groups will have access for you to get that because it is a subscription base, so you can look into that. Any other questions as we kind of wrap up? Just again, I want to, you see on the slide here, a save the date. Our next webinar in December, we're going to kind of squeeze one more in before the end of the year. And I'm super excited to announce that we're going to be having Stephen Shattuck of Bloomerang. Bloomerang is one of the leading donor management softwares in the software programs in the country. They're just amazing work, and we're gonna do a Giving Tuesday recap. And if you don't know about Giving Tuesday, I'd encourage you to check it out. But what happens is the Tuesday after Black Friday, so the big shopping weekend after Thanksgiving, the Tuesday after has become going on about the 3rd or 4th year, what they call hashtag Giving Tuesday. It's a way, again, talking about social media, it's a way to encourage people to take a break from the shopping and take a minute and think about giving back to charity. And so nonprofits around the country will encourage folks to take a minute and give a donation or two to the things they care about using the hashtag Giving Tuesday. So we're going to recap that. We're going to talk about what it looked like. We're going to tell you how much was given. And with just a few weeks left in the year, we're going to talk about some ways you can still do some end of the year giving. If you listen to my last webinar, you'll know that 60-70% of the donations throughout the year all come in the months of November and December. Mm-hmm. So it's a great time of year. So with that, thank you for the feedback. Thank you for that, Tangala, if I said your name right. Awesome webinar, lots of experience. Thanks for assisting us. Yep, that's what we're here for. So again, if you have any other questions or thoughts, feel free to reach out to us. Mike, I want to thank you for the work you're doing in the community. Thank you for sharing that. If you are a newer nonprofit and you are in any kind of need of accounting or fund donor management software, you can reach out to Aplos for that. So with that, we want to, again, thank you and wishing everybody a happy Thanksgiving and appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedules to join an Aplos webinar. So you can check out our website for more, and we'll talk to you all again. Thanks.